Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. So, as we've been doing lately, let's do some Fresh Catholic news. Well, Fresh Catholic Daily, where I do the daily readings from Mass, that is going very well, my friends. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting people know. And I'm so happy that the Holy Spirit urged me into wanting to do these daily readings. I think Simon's doing a beautiful job with the music, and we have Andrew Petraka, our music director at the church, who sings the Alleluia, so I appreciate that. But I hope you are listening. If you're not, give it a try. It's nice and short. It's something that's very doable every day, starts your day off great, so please listen. Also, please consider ordering some coffee from our online store. If you would just do that, it would be so helpful to our ministry, and even Father Mike Schmitz gets help from people. So we all need help to do these podcasts. I hope you are enjoying them. Check out our online store. And also, I would appreciate it if you would become one of my Patreons. There's different levels. They're very doable. $5, $10, and on up. You get little perks and merchandise. So that's also at my website. All this is at my website, freshcatholic.com. I would appreciate you, as you're just on your computer, go check it out. Please also send questions for Ask Deacon Dawn, our new segment we're going to be starting. Please send me any emails you like or questions for Deacon Dawn at lori@freshcatholic.com. That's my email address. I'm looking forward to my guests that are coming up, Priest Peter Pomposello and Sabrina McManigal. I am looking forward to having them come, and you can hear their stories. I think it'll be amazing. So now let's get started. Welcome, Simon Balderas.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little tired.
I know. It's been a very strange day today.
Yeah. No, it's been good. I just got back from the gym, and I went a little bit too hard this time.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I'm glad you did it. It's good for your body.
Yeah.
And good for your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I also got some bad news today about one of my friends who had passed away, a childhood friend. And so I just got that news literally before we sat down. So I'm a little rocky at the moment, but we'll get through this.
Yeah.
So last week we talked about some New Age practices, and we talked about the serpent in the garden and how he is kind of in our everyday life, that serpent.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great episode. I just didn't feel satisfied that I was done with that sort of topic.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring a little bit of clarity on, because I re-listened to it after it was broadcast, we talked a lot about The Secret and the book The Secret and stuff, but we really didn't define what it is. The Secret is a book. It's also a television feature film about what the secret means, which of course is the lie of the serpent. And it's a very, very popular thing. There's a lot of celebrities that are in that film and that apply these concepts of manifesting and vision boards and basically doing the things that the serpent told Eve that she could do, that she could become like gods. I think it's important just to, again, just clarify what it is. It's a program, it's a book, it's a video series, and I don't know if you want to say anything else about it.
Yeah, and I think we kind of covered it in the last episode, and I was saying I was introduced to it when my son Cody was reading the book, and I didn't know what it was about, and I was just like, whatever, you know. Mm-hmm. I didn't really get into it. I knew of it.
Yeah, it's been around for, 20 years.
Yeah, and I do know a lot of people really follow it, but I do feel like people that follow things like that, follow books like that, are lost and they don't know where else to go. So they look to these books, like self-help books and books where it's like, oh, I'm just going to read this book and I'm going to make a vision board and everything's going to go great.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also are just seeking in general, and they may be turned off by walking into a church or going back to the Catholic Church or for whatever reason. And so instead they go into Barnes & Noble and go into the spirituality section.
Right.
And they look up these books.
Right. And but I do think that's part of the thing that I want to talk about today. Again, I didn't feel satisfied that I covered what I wanted to cover completely in the last episode. And so one of the things I know, when I told you I wanted to continue this topic, at first you weren't too keen on the idea because I feel like you thought maybe I was promoting these things that we're going to talk about, or that we're giving it too much energy and too much power.
What it really is, it was something that I mentioned to you before, is I really don't like talking about demons and all that kind of stuff and give them any kind of attention. I'd rather just focus on Christ. I know it's something that we can't ignore, especially when it's causing a lot of damage, like the things that you want to talk about today. So it's important. It's a personal thing in my life. I just don't give that stuff any credence or any attention.
Right. And I think that's wonderful. And I think you're a great role model to think about that you're in that spot, that you're in that mindset is great. I'm so happy that you are. Like we talked about in the New Year's episode, where you told me I give Satan too much credit, and I told you I was going to work on that, and I have been working on it. I feel really relieved. I changed how I've been praying lately. I've been giving way more attention to God and Jesus, and not that I wasn't before. There was this undercurrent, this dirty, muddy sludge of Satan oozing in and trying to take over when I was doing a prayer to Jesus, you know?
Interesting.
And so I appreciate that you were giving me that challenge of like, stop giving him so much credit.
Yeah, he just needs to get out of the way and say...
get out of the way.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you sitting here saying you don't want to give these things effort and time, that's great. But I don't feel everybody else thinks that way.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about necessarily my listeners. I would hope my listeners are way beyond these things that are damaging. I think what I'm concerned with is, like, for example, let's say my listeners feel the same way you do, where it's like, I don't give these things the time of day. I don't give them any effort or energy. I expect that, actually. I would imagine most of my listeners are in that boat. But that doesn't mean the people around them are in that same boat.
Yeah.
And so I think the reason I want to talk about this today and pursue this a little bit more is it's a cautionary tale. It's a warning episode, because one of the reasons this really has popped into my head is that I listened to a podcast by a Christian gentleman, and he's had this woman come on quite often. He does a podcast called Playing with Fire. Okay? So it's about people who are ex-psychics or people who were in the occult, and they have turned to the Lord. So they've left it behind them. So they come on his show to tell him how they got away, how they broke away from these New Age practices or the occult, and what they're doing now that Jesus is the Lord of their life. And they're telling people so people will know, oh my gosh, I'm doing that thing, or oh my gosh, I'm dabbling in this over here. So they're coming on and using their experiences that they just thought were normal in their life.
Right.
And so one of the women that came on, she's come on a few times as a guest. Her podcast is called Ex-Psychic Saved, and her name is Jen Nizza. The theme is exposing divination, New Age, and the occult.
Right.
So she has lots of guests, and they're very concentrated to certain things. Like she had a former astrologist. She had a former yoga instructor. She had a former woman that made not tarot cards, but these things called angel cards, which were just as bad as tarot cards. They just had a prettier name. I'm not that far into the series, but every time I listen, I'm not doing the things that they're talking about, but it's making me aware of what's out there and what are some pitfalls in our world today that maybe our friends are dabbling in or our children.
I had a similar experience when I listened to Father Ripperger, who is a demonologist, exorcist person.
Yes.
He's one of the foremost exorcists in the Catholic Church. He got his doctorate in Rome, and he's very tied into the Vatican and so forth. He talks a lot about this stuff, more specifically exorcisms and demonology and all that kind of stuff. Even though I'm not interested in that stuff, I did listen to a bunch of his lectures, and I really gleaned a lot of stuff from what he said that didn't necessarily say I'm into any of that stuff, but it gave me, for example, the will to go to confession immediately, because that's what separates us from Christ, is any kind of sin.
Right.
So I wanted to experience that sacrament immediately. When I heard that, I got really inspired, and I said, I'm going to go to confession, and I had a really miraculous experience there. So I gleaned that from it. I gleaned a lot of other things, and also I gleaned that realm, that satanic realm, the demons and stuff, they're very limited in power. They might be powerful in a lot of ways, but they're really more deceptive.
Yeah.
And their destiny has already been determined. Their free will is gone.
Yeah.
They already made their choice. And unlike us. And they are there to influence us to do bad things and to turn away from God and repeat again, like the same lie of the secret and follow your own will, and you can become like God. It's the same old thing.
Right.
I think, and also I do want to say, and I think there's something that was missing from the last episode that we did. I just want to say that God is a very creative God. He is the creator. Unlike Satan, he's a one-trick pony.
Mm.
He only has really one thing to do and one thing to say, and it's just a big lie.
Right.
And that you are your own God. You are in charge of your own destiny in terms of self-will, but we can't will things. We can't manifest things into existence. It's
right. Well, and I do think Satan's entire, like you're saying, his goal is to distance people from the Lord. That's his number one goal. He'll do anything he can to dazzle somebody, to make them promises, to show them things that they think they want, to turn them away from God, to think people don't need God in their life. That's his number one.
It is. And the extreme example of that, especially what Father Ripperger talks about, is when somebody, for example, is demon possessed. The whole goal of this demon is to make sure that you're living in a state of sin and then commit suicide. That's their ultimate goal. That's all they want you to do, so that you will be cast away. And again, one-trick pony, that's all they have. That's all they're motivated to do. And it's just interesting to know that and to hear that and put it in perspective.
Right. We're in this episode now, but I would have said earlier, but I just want to be sure I state this. We're not doing this episode to glorify any of these things we're going to talk about at all. It's quite the contrary. Like I said, it's a cautionary tale. It's to help people to know what not to do. It's to help people to recognize what these bad and evil things are that's in the world, because I think they're disguised as party games or fun toys, and they're not.
Right.
And so I know sometimes people say, oh, religious people, they're so over the top. They're making a big deal out of nothing, but it is something. It isn't good. And so that's one reason I want to talk about it. I know you listen to Father Ripperger, and I listen to this ex-psychic. I think that their stories, because they're real, they're true stories that they're talking about. And they're also trying to warn and open people's eyes. And so I just want to say that so people don't think we're glorifying any of this stuff, because we're not.
Yeah. Well, no, we're not glorifying it, and we're not getting into it because we're fascinated by that, dark realm.
No, it's more that I want to be sure what I'm doing is in alignment with what God wants me to do. And what's kind of interesting is when I was a little girl, I dabbled in these kind of crazy things. And I, of course, I wasn't in any religion. I didn't really know what I was doing. I used to like to pretend a lot. And I would read books about witches, and I would do little witches spells. I even sent away for a little witches kit in the mail when I was a little girl. And my dad had a Ouija board, and we would play with the Ouija board. And I did all these things. And I kind of put it in a back compartment of my brain, and it was back there for a long time. And just recently, like maybe even last summer, when things kind of started going a little haywire, all of a sudden, I think I was listening to one of these podcasts, and I got this panic attack of like, oh my gosh, you know what? I used to do that stuff. I got to get it out. I went to confession, and I told the priest, oh my gosh, when I was a little girl, I did these things. And I kind of half expected him to say, it's okay, you were a little girl. It was no big deal. He did not say that. He said, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're confessing this, and let's get you clean from this.
Yeah. And
so that just shows there's no excuse for it.
There's no excuse. I think also, like you said, your dad had a Ouija board. That makes him sound like he's some kind of wizard or something. He really isn't. The Ouija board was made by Parker Brothers, the same people who make Monopoly. So it's a game that you could go to Target and buy.
Right. I mean, his wasn't from Target. His was from like the 1920s.
What I'm trying to say is that it became very mainstream, and a lot of people had them. I had friends in high school and junior high that.
Oh, yeah, you can walk into Barnes & Noble and it's on the front pedestal.
Just a funny little game.
Yeah. But anyway.
But it's not.
It's not. It's not at all. But I'm just being honest that we used to play with that. I didn't know any different.
Yeah. Can I jump ahead just really quick? Because I think it's important here. People are probably wondering, well, why is it not? It's just a game. Kids play these things all the time. It's not, because it does something. And what does it do? I know what it does, but I kind of want...
It's a portal.
It opens... Yes, it's a portal.
It opens a door. And so a lot of the things that I want to talk about today, that's exactly what they do. They crack open a door, they open a portal, and it's an invitation to bring demonic forces into your life and into your household.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what it is. So things like tarot cards, things like the Ouija board, seances, fortune telling, all these things. Numerology, charts, all these things. It opens up a portal. It invites these demons into your life and into your household. And then they stay until something eliminates them.
They stay, and they can bother you and or not. And ultimately, the ultimate form of that to the extreme is that they open up a portal. Let's say they do it every day and they get really, really into it. And now they have this gaping hole. They have the potential to become possessed.
Yes.
And that's the ultimate form. That's all the devil wants to do, is they want to possess you.
And when we talk about things like that, it sounds like it's just something from a movie, something made up.
Right.
It's actually not.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, those Catholics, they're so over the top and they're so dramatic. Actually, we're not. My personal opinion, again, I'm not an expert or a theologian in any of this, but my personal opinion is, if you're trying to be a very good Catholic and you're trying to be very faithful to Jesus and his teachings, and we've talked about before, it becomes a lifestyle. It's your lifestyle, and it should be the most important thing in your life. Well, of course, Satan wants to damage that. Yeah. He doesn't want you to be successful at it. And so this is my point. Whether you're Catholic, not Catholic, if you welcome these practices into your life, they might seem fun at first, but if you're Catholic, you're not supposed to be doing these things.
Right.
You're just not.
And I know it sounds like we're talking about all kinds of pretty crazy stuff like you said, it would in a horror movie that you would see. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important for people to remember that we are living here in this physical world. We are surrounded by the spiritual world. We just can't necessarily see it. As you know, I'm writing this book.
I know, it's very exciting. You heard it here first.
About opening up that veil so that you can see the spiritual realm as well as the physical realm. And the thing that I really wanted to point out is that there is a war going on. Mm-hmm. There is a war between good and evil.
Yes.
And you messing around with this kind of stuff is really fueling this dark realm.
Right. And so that being said, that's a good segue for, I would like to read out of the Catechism of the Catholic Church what it says about fortune telling and such.
Okay.
Okay. So it's like the rules, right? So from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Divination and Magic, number 2115. God can reveal the future to his prophets or to other saints. Still, a sound Christian attitude consists in putting oneself confidently into the hands of Providence for whatever concerns the future, and giving up all unhealthy curiosity about it. Improvidence, however, can constitute a lack of responsibility. Number 2116 says, all forms of divination are to be rejected. Recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future, consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretation of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums all conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as to wish to conciliate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear that we owe to God alone. Number 2117 says, all practices of magic or sorcery by which one attempts to tame occult powers so as to place them at one's service and have a supernatural power over others, even if this were for the sake of restoring their health, are gravely contrary to the virtue of religion. These practices are even more to be condemned when accompanied by the intention of harming someone, or when they have recourse to the intervention of demons. Wearing charms is also reprehensible. Spiritualism often implies divination or magical practices. The Church, for her part, warns the faithful against it. Recourse to so-called traditional cures does not justify either the invocation of evil powers or the exploitation of another's credulity. So I know that sounds like a lot.
Kind of want to put those a little bit in layman's terms. For example, when they talk about charms, for example, charms nowadays might be somebody's into crystals. They think these crystals have power and they do certain things, and this is for this mood and that's for this.
Right.
This is for depression. I've heard all these
Right.
really weird things about stones and all this stuff. We're not allowed to do that.
Right. Again, that's something that's very attractive. People are looking, they're seeking out these things to give them answers and give them comfort and all these things, but they're not based in anything. It's superstition.
Right.
Is what it is.
And the other thing, too, that I want to mention that I learned, demons are very limited in their power. They're finite creatures. For example, they don't know the future. They might trick you into thinking that they know the future and that they have powers beyond. For example, let's just say you went to a fortune teller, and this fortune teller is being influenced by a demon because that's who they're really consulting. They hear all of these things. They get this...
Because they've opened a portal.
They've opened a portal, so they get all of this kind of knowledge and so forth. And what demons do know is they know a lot about people. And they know a lot about the people around you and the people that you have interacted with. For example, your father. And the fortune teller might say, oh, I understand that your father died of pancreatic cancer. And you might think, oh my God, how does she know that?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you think, they really know me. And if they say something about the future, it's a lie. And the lie is from this demon that's telling the fortune teller, that's again telling you. And so just that alone, that single trip, and they say all this stuff about your dad and stuff that only you knew, you might be really fascinated by that. And you might all of a sudden go down this really dark path.
Right.
And that's very, very dangerous.
Right. I remember you telling me that they know about past things, but they don't know the future, and they're making it up, and it's all lies. And nobody can know what the future holds except God. That's it.
Right.
Instead of even thinking all these other things, the answer is God has the answers.
Right. And again, really the only power that they have, and the only power that all of these things might dazzle you with, it's sleight of hand.
Right.
You know, it's saying one thing and showing you another and that sort of thing. And it's not really real. It's a trick.
Right.
Just like what Eve said in the garden. He tricked me. And that's all he can do. He can only trick you.
We'll be right back.
Rising anti-Semitism. New generations redefining how they connect with Jewish traditions. Changing dynamics among Jews around the globe. Take a deep dive into these topics and more on Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, the podcast brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Hear from the thought leaders, politicians, scholars, and artists at the forefront of Jewish life today. Subscribe to Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, wherever you listen to podcasts.
So one of the things I was going to say is, because I want to talk about like tarot cards, horoscopes, those might seem like fun kind of things to do. I know a lot of people read their horoscope every day. It's a cute little thing that I guess you look up and you can turn it into anything. You can read it every day and go, oh, yeah, it says I'm going to meet a handsome stranger. Well, then you're going to be looking all day for a handsome stranger. It's made up. It's everywhere. It's online. It's in the newspaper. Everybody knows their sign.
Yeah.
It's like that's a very typical thing of what's your sign.
Right. It's just as available as to going into Target and buying a Ouija.
Right. So whoever they are, the people that want to make money off of all this stuff are making it very available to people because they want to lure people in to these practices. It's a racket is what it is. And the tarot cards, they're very interesting looking. It's something that people are into. I've never had any dealings with tarot cards at all, but I was telling you, we have a friend that's been posting tarot card readings on Instagram. So I didn't stop following him altogether because I want to see what else he's up to. But the second I see that's what he's doing, I scroll right past it. I don't want anything of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's putting it right out there on Instagram for everybody to see. So, and that's his choice, and people will tune into it. I'm just saying it's a cautionary tale here.
Yeah.
And then mediums and psychics, all these things are used to gain insight into the past, present, and future. That's how they market it. Okay? So I read this quote that Pope Francis said. Apparently he was doing Mass, and all of a sudden he stopped what he was doing kind of in the middle of his homily, and he made this statement. So this is a quote from Pope Francis. How is it possible, if you believe in Jesus Christ, you go to a sorcerer, a fortune teller, these types of people? Magic is not Christian. These things that are done to predict the future or predict many things or change situations in life are not Christian. The grace of Christ can bring you everything. Pray and trust in the Lord. Pretty simple.
Wonder why he stopped in the middle of what he was doing.
I don't know. This was important to him to bring up. My point is, I don't think it had to do with what he was talking about.
Okay.
I think he wanted to make a point of talking about this. Maybe the Holy Spirit came to him and said, Francis, now is the time.
Right. And again, I think it's important to note that usually they start out as some kind of innocent thing.
Mm-hmm.
An innocent game. Oh, cool. Look at these tarot cards. They look really, really cool. I like the artwork, for example. Mm-hmm. So they start out that way, but they really go deep.
Yes. It's the same with the tarot cards, the crystals, pretending the Ouija board is a party game. All these things. It's air quote fun. It's all fun.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it ends up taking your gaze away from Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's promising you things or leading you down a path that isn't him.
Yeah.
Anytime that you are being separated from the Lord and his teachings is going down the wrong path.
Right. And just on a practical level, I know we talked about this a little bit about where do you draw the line on this stuff? Should you tell your kids that they can't read the Harry Potter series? Maybe you should recommend that they read the Chronicles of Narnia series instead.
Yes.
Or Ursula Le Guin.
Yes. Well, so I looked up the Harry Potter issue because you asked me that before we started recording. And basically what it said was it's a fictional story. It's harmless. that sort of thing. However, this is what I'm going to say about things like that. As an adult, we can make choices, right? So if we decide to go to a fortune teller or do tarot cards or do a Ouija board and we're adults, that's bad enough. And we're in charge of our own life as far as we have free will. So it's like, oh, I go to a party and they're doing tarot cards. Am I going to gracefully leave or am I going to stay and partake? Well, my choice, Lori Balderas' choice, would be that I would graciously leave because I wouldn't even want to be there for that. Okay?
Yeah.
But a child has to have rules and boundaries. This is how we teach them. And they're not going to die if they can't read the Harry Potter books. They're just not. So one of the things is, yes, that's a great alternative to say, we don't believe in reading these things. Whatever it is, it doesn't just have to be targeted to Harry Potter. If it's a movie, if it's a book that you don't agree with as a family or as Catholics or as Christians, you need to say to your children, this goes against our morals and ethics and it's dangerous for you. Just like I'm not going to let you play with razor blades. I'm not going to let you drink poison. I don't want you to interact with these things because they're dangerous to you. And I love you and I want you to be safe.
Right.
Okay? And then give them the alternative of the books that are more positive, equally as exciting and adventurous and wonderful. You know, that might be a gateway book to something else, just like there's gateway drugs.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's just marijuana. Well, my experience with marijuana, the people that I know that started with marijuana turned into drug addicts with other drugs. So if you're just allowing certain things, put your foot down. You're the parent. Make some guidelines for your child.
I think knowledge is power. And if you do prevent your kids or discourage them from reading those kinds of things or even dressing up as really ugly monsters or something during Halloween, that's okay. But when they're of age and they have the ability to understand and break things apart, that's even equally as important, to sit down with them and say, I know I discouraged you from reading this stuff before, but here's why.
Yeah.
And then you can have a more serious conversation.
I think you should do that all along.
Yeah, but they might not be of age, you know.
Okay.
You know, that's what I'm saying. When they're kids and stuff, they just say, I want all my friends are reading this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can still offer an alternative and do something creative. And also, that being said, sometimes if you put your foot down and say, you're not going to read this book because it goes against our morals and ethics, they most probably will sneak it and do it anyway. But you'll know as a parent, you at least tried. Instead of saying, oh, read whatever you want. Do whatever you want, dear. You have to know as a parent that at least you tried to teach them and guide them to not do these things. Or to know, if you go to a party and they're doing tarot cards or they're doing this, you need to probably come home.
I think it's one thing to innocently go to a party and say, oh, okay, I should leave. That's one thing. But the reality of the way people actually turn to these things is, if you have a troubled individual that's really seeking something important to change their life, they say, I'm going to go to a psychic so that I can have some understanding, then that's very, very dangerous, because if they base their decisions on these lies, they're just going to get worse.
And that is what's happening.
Right.
So I guess that's what I'm saying is, this is a cautionary tale of, if anybody had a question, if these things are okay to do, they're not. They're not okay to do. So if you're a grown-up and you're an adult and you've been doing these things and you're Catholic or you're Christian, you're a follower of Jesus, you need to stop. You need to go to confession. You need to clean that vessel and move forward and pray and focus on the Lord. That's what you do. You pray to Him. You ask Him to guide you in your life. You ask Him to help you. That's what you do. You don't keep going. Once you know you shouldn't be doing these things, you must stop. Otherwise, if you continue doing it, now that you know what you're doing is wrong and a sin, you're compounding your sin. You need to stop. And if your children are coming to you and they have questions about these things, let's say they're a teenager, or you find tarot cards in your teenager's room, or Ouija board, or you realize that they're getting their chart done or something, it's okay to speak up. You don't have to be their buddy pal. You have to be their parent.
Right.
And you have to guide them in the right direction, because if you don't, you're aiding and abetting them in sinning. And if you have little children, start them when they're so young, knowing what the morals and ethics are, and explain to them as you go along. We don't do this because of this reason.
Yeah. And when you say that, it concerns me a little bit, because it wakes me up to the fact that we live in a world full of landmines. I mean, when I think of little kids, I think of going to Disneyland and watching Disney movies and all this kind of stuff. And there's little gateways in there. There's fairies and demons and dragons and the Sorcerer's Stone and all this stuff. There's all that. We're just kind of surrounded by it. I think that...
And Disney's getting worse and worse.
I know. But it's been like that since its inception.
Not like it is now.
Well, I know. But fantasy has been around for a very long time, even in fairy tales and that sort of thing. That's why it's important to really be Catholic through and through, and to really have that be more part of their life than these fairy tales, because that's all they are, fairy tales.
Right.
And to have that relationship with your kids and give them the understanding that these things are separate and made up and supposedly could be dangerous.
Well, and I do think, like I'm saying, the earlier you start with your children, and you're raising your children Catholic or Christian, and the Lord is really important in your life and in your family's life, if you can just make these where it's not like a bad thing, it's negative, or they feel like they're missing out. You know, it's like if you introduce vegetables to your children when they're babies, and you just continue on and you don't make a big deal about, ooh, it's yucky broccoli. If you make it a normal part of their life, they don't know that that's something that other children don't like. It's how you present it to them. So if you present to your children, we're going to watch these movies, we're going to read these books, we're going to go do these activities that are all things that are going to bring us closer to Christ instead of separating us from him.
Yeah.
We don't want to be separated from them. And then when they get older, hopefully they'll have a stronger foundation. And yes, you're right. There are these things out in the world everywhere. Children are only innocent for a very small, short amount of time now, because everything's at everybody's fingertips. They can just Google anything, and little kids can do it.
Yeah.
And that's scary. And so we have to just be like a really good, strong foundation with, obviously, Christ with us constantly.
Yeah. And I think that it's really important to not shelter your kids, but arm your kids. For example, when I was young, I was very, very sheltered. I was very, very innocent until I was a teenager even. And I wasn't prepared for the world. I wasn't armed. I just was protected from it. I was shielded from it. I wasn't allowed to see certain things or understand certain things. That's why it's important that you also talk to your kids about the tough stuff.
Right.
Too.
Make them street smart.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I wasn't sheltered. It was quite the opposite. But I wasn't given any tools. I wasn't told, like, you don't want to start drinking when you're 14 because of XYZ. Just don't drink. I had to figure all this out on my own. I was free falling, figuring it out on my own. No, this is what I was told by my parents. Be a good person. Okay, well, I was a good person. I was nice. I was friendly. But there's more to life than that. And yes, you do need to arm them. Give them tools so when they're put in a bad position, and this is, again, this is for children. This is for teenagers. This is if your children are young adults. This is for ourselves as 50-something-year-olds. We have to be armed to know how to handle a situation when we're presented with it. We're board members of the Ojai Film Festival, and the film world is sketchy at best. You know, it's not the most moral and ethical business. And there was a couple things that came up with the film festival that you and I morally and ethically didn't want to have to do with. And we have a reputation for being Catholic. And we were, one of the people on the board knows that, and respectfully said, you don't need to be involved in these conversations. You can opt out of these things. I thought that was very respectful. And of course, we didn't agree with the things that they wanted to have at this festival, And ultimately, they didn't have either one of the things. One was a tarot card reader. One was a very X-rated movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't want to be a part of any of that.
Yeah. Right.
We didn't make a big stink about it, but we separated ourselves from it.
Imagine if you could go back in time and let's just say you wanted to go play with your dad's Ouija board, but you were going to play that with a kid who was armed and educated. And you said, hey, I want to play this game, and then you pull it down, and they said to you, I'm not going to play that game because, and they explained to you why. That's what I mean.
Yes, I wish I had somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing I've said in past episodes also, where I wish I had been a Catholic teenager. I wish I would have had a moral compass. I wish I would have had that. And I don't know if this is going to sound disrespectful, and I don't mean it to be disrespectful, but I wish I had the excuse of, well, I'm Catholic. I can't do that, whatever it was. I can't do this because I'm Catholic. I wish I would have had that because I wasn't strong enough to say no. I wish I would have had tools to navigate. So then I gave my children tools. I made sure that they were street smart. I made sure especially that my daughter had a way to navigate herself through these different things so that she didn't feel like she had to fall for what was out there in the world.
Yeah. And I think all you can do as parents is try. There's an experiment where a little kid's sitting in a room and you put a dish of really delicious candies in front of them and you say, don't eat any of those. I'm going to leave for a few minutes. Make sure you don't touch those. And those things are calling to that little kid. And it's tough. So sometimes you have to exercise a little fortitude.
Right.
And hopefully your kids will. It'll sink in really in a good way and they will have enough fortitude to turn away from those things. But
Or like they say, where, how do you act when you think nobody's watching? Do you make the right choice? Does the child take the candy or does the child sit there and stare? I would imagine they take the candy.
Right. Yeah. Well, one thing my mom especially used to tell me is that Jesus is always watching. He's right there.
Well, my mom used to tell me, somebody's always watching you, which I don't know, that was scary, but I always knew that somebody was going to tell my mom and I had to be really mindful, and I kind of chucked that out the window when I was a crazy teenager. But I'm just saying that I think if you give your child tools, or yourself, like I'm saying, I don't want to target children in this, but we do need to set boundaries for our children. They do need to know why we don't want them to do something. It can't just be no. It's no, and this is why.
Right. Discerning.
Yeah. And then we're not going to negotiate it. It's no.
Right.
And this is why. And this is how you can navigate yourself through it, because it is everywhere.
It is everywhere. And like you're saying, even for adults, if you go into Barnes & Noble and you want to get a self-help book, there's some good ones, but there's some that aren't very good.
I think being easily dazzled by things and easily wooed away from God, especially if you're in a weakened state and you're seeking answers and seeking guidance and you're seeking it from the wrong place, Satan's going to make it very attractive to you to turn away from the Lord. And I know you and I are going through a lot of troubling things going on, and I know I have moments where I feel like Satan is really trying to turn, I'll just speak for myself, turn me away from God and go, he's not there for you. You should be really upset because look, he's nowhere to be found and you're just floundering about and you're drowning. And I'll say sometimes, I rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ. Leave me alone. Go away. Because I can feel it. So we have to know that in our faith, Catholics have sacraments of healing, which are penance and anointing of the sick. When we need something, we have prayer, we have fasting, we have confession. We have all these things. We don't need Satan. We don't need tarot cards. We don't need all these things. We just don't. We need to rely 100% on the Lord. That's it.
Okay. I agree.
That was my pep talk.
Okay. I'm right there with you.
The podcast I listened to from the ex-psychic, she also has a lot of guests that discuss yoga and Reiki and Kundalini and all these things. And those are also things you should separate yourself from. because they have to do with bowing down to other gods and doing poses that glorify other gods, and we're not supposed to be doing those. Go do something else for your health. Go do something else. You can stretch, you can work out, you can go on a run, you can go on a walk, you can swim. You don't need to do those things.
Okay. I got to tell you, I have tried yoga. I hate yoga.
Oh,
just as an exercise.
that's a strong statement.
I do not like it at all.
Well, I think it's something that markets itself as a really good positive thing. And I disagree. And I think you have to look at where it came from and what you're actually doing. So if you want to take some good deep breaths, take some good deep breaths and pray to the Lord. If you want to do some stretching and some exercise, do stretching and exercise while listening to some beautiful Catholic music. You don't have to be doing yoga and Reiki and Kundalini.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of resources, like you said. The podcast that you're listening to, Father Rippinger, is amazing. You should put some links in your show notes with all these things, because if people want to go a little bit deeper, these people are very, very knowledgeable.
Yes.
All these things.
And I think, again, like you made the comment, knowledge is power. And I think that's really important. We all need to take Christ's shield and put it in front of us and just know we can make it through this. We can dodge all this stuff. We don't have to get involved in it at all. We can help our friends and family to seek out things that are actually going to help them in their life, in their body, soul, and spirit, and that is with the Lord. They don't need to be doing these things, and neither do we. So in closing, read about these things, check them out. It doesn't mean you're condoning it. It means you are trying to be very knowledgeable to protect yourself from these dazzling disasters waiting to happen.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening today. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is produced, edited, and recorded at Wonder Mouse Studios in Ventura, California.